we'll jump right into the highlight, and that is going to be our speakers. Our first speaker today is Brenden. Is it Kumarasamy?
Don't worry about it, Greg.
What
You
is
just
it? What
call
is
me.
it?
It's Kumarasamy.
Kumarasamy.
Yeah, you got it.
You know, I said that like 12 times earlier, and then I screwed it up. So I apologize for that.
Nothing to apologize for.
Yeah, so I basically titled his speech as Coaching Session on Public Speaking. Brenden is the founder of Master Talk, a YouTube channel he started to help the world to master the art of public speaking. He has helped purpose-driven entrepreneurs around the world master their story and share it. Please help me welcome Brenden Kumarasamy. You're on, my friend.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's so great to be here. I always like to start my workshops with an acknowledgement. And the acknowledgement I would like to give you all is to have the open-mindedness to come to a meeting like this, to keep working on your communication skills when things are getting rough, when things are getting difficult. And it's so great to see the open-mindedness and the strategies that you're taking to say, hey, let me work on these skills. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that. The other thing I wanted to say before I start my presentation is the way that I speak is not necessarily the right one. This is just the way that I like to talk. I'm very loud. I love taking up space in a room. I have a lot of energy. But I've coached people who have lied on the opposite end of the spectrum. People who are very introverted, shy, who don't like to talk that much, who would rather read a book than come to a Toastmasters meeting. So all's to say is whether you're in the extroverted crazy person category like myself, or someone who's very introverted who doesn't really like to interact with others, all spectrums can learn from this workshop. So keep an open mind, and I hope you learn a lot from today's presentation. Much like every first-generation immigrant, our goal is very simple. Please our parents, do really well in school, and get the best possible job. So that's what I did. I studied a lot, got the best grades in school, and got a job. So I did very well academically, whether it was in mathematics or languages. But when it came to public speaking, this was a more accurate representation of who I was. So now the question is why? Why is someone like me who's speaking at this seminar, why was he so scared of public speaking for the vast majority of his life? And the main reason was when I was 5 years old, my parents came up to me and said, well, Brenden, you live in Montreal, Canada, and you need to learn French because you're not going to be successful in this market if you don't know the language. So I got put into a French school. So not only was I uncomfortable with presentations, I also had to give a presentation in a language I didn't even know. So you can imagine the anxiety that I had for the vast majority of my life when it came to presentations. And this story has a simple message to it. And that message, besides the look on my face when I heard the news, is that public speaking can be taught exactly like leadership. In the same way that when we think about leaders, we know that they're not born, but rather created over a series of experiences. My life's purpose is to teach the world that public speaking works in the exact same way. There's a set of steps that you need to take. And if you walk those steps in the same way that you've all done today, by coming to this workshop, you can master the art of public speaking. Hi, everyone. My name is Brenden Kumarasamy. I'm the founder of Master Talk, a YouTube channel I started to help the world master the art of public speaking. And today we're going to be covering 3 out of 5 of my public speaking tips for today's webinar. So let's get into it. Let's just skip this. I'm a professional speech coach, so let's just start with the agenda. Let's start by talking about audience mastery. If I were to summarize public speaking in one sentence, or rather a question, that question would be as follows. How do I convince a group of strangers to fall in love with me and my ideas? That is the greatest challenge, but also the greatest benefit of public speaking. If you can convince people that you don't even know to buy into you and take action on your ideas, you have mastered the art of public speaking as per my definition. Here's a good example, my introduction. Why did I introduce my story and my life in that way? I could have started my presentation by telling you all the accolades and all the clients that I have, but how would that relate to you? You would look at me and say, who is this guy? But instead, if I tell you a story that relates to the one thing that we all have in common, whether you're a 10-year-old girl who wants to master public speaking and is scared of it, all the way to a senior tenured executive of a company, we all share something in common. And that commonality is our shared fear of public speaking at some point in our lives. So by introducing the way that I do, I relate better to the audience and I gain trust as quickly as possible, because you'll look at me and you won't put me on a pedestal anymore, but rather you'll say, well, if Brenden can do it, I probably can too. And the point of this message in this slide is that the quality of your presentation lives and dies by how engaged your audience is. Think about this presentation. You're all very busy folks. There's lots of commitments, clients in some cases, exam schedules, commitments. How do I break the noise? So the next time that you give a presentation, I don't want you to just think about what content I'm going to present, but rather obsess over my audience to the point that I understand all of their needs and wants. Because remember, great speakers think about their audience, but exceptional ones obsess over them. They interview them, they talk to them, they have discussions with them. They make sure that they understand every little detail so that they can master the message for the presentation that they have. But to keep it simple for today, I'll leave you with 3 questions that I want you all to think about. The first one is, what is the goal of your presentation? This seems simple, but it has different connotations to it. If you're someone whose goal is to educate a crowd, like in this webinar, your goal is very different. But if your goal instead is to sell something to a client, to get business somewhere, to convince a loved one to go out to the right place to eat tonight, all of those goals are very different, and all of the intentions are also very different. So always visualize the goal of your presentation. Second question, who is your audience and what are their needs and expectations? When I'm presenting to a group of 10-year-olds, teenagers, they're not really looking for public speaking tips. They're rather looking for someone to say, you can do it. You can get up on stage. You can totally do it. So the way that I communicate with Rebecca when she tells me, Brenden, I can't speak, I can say, of course you can. You're a beautiful girl. You have a great voice. And all you need to do is stand up and speak. But that's very different when I'm talking to 55-year-old senior executive at IBM who's looking at me with a little bit of a not so happy face and says, well, I've been doing this for 30 years, so can you just get to the point? Right. So notice how the audience that I'm speaking to, completely different. So for you in your Toastmaster meetings, something I always like to touch upon for you guys specifically is when you're talking at a meeting, it's very different versus an area contest. Because when you're in a meeting, you're always talking to the same people. Greg is always going to be there. David is always going to be there. Michael, Brad, Tally, everyone's going to be there. But in an area contest, now everyone from all the clubs in Ohio, or whatever the perimeter is, are there. So the audience changes completely, and their needs and expectations changes as well. Because in a club meeting, that need is, hey, do your best job, and whatever you did tomorrow needs to be better than yesterday. And we're there cheering you on. But in an area contest, if you're competing, the judges will be looking for something specific. Do you have the criteria that we're looking for in this presentation? So always think about that when you're crafting your presentations. Third, and probably my favorite question, is how do we meet their needs in a way that gets them excited to talk about our ideas? Most speakers are really good with the content. They know what to say. They do the research. But what I want to challenge you all today, since you all are very open-minded, is to think about ways to present the exact same information in an exciting way. Communication, just in and of itself, is a very boring subject. Ums and ahs, silences, pauses, eye contact. But if you can present that same information in a way that inspires a crowd, that gets them to take action, you've presented the exact same thing in a way that gets people to buy into you at the highest level. So the next time you craft a presentation, especially after you've practiced it quite a bit, is don't just ask yourself, what do I need to present? But rather, how do I need to present it so that Craig and everyone else in the club is excited to hear me? Now let's move into eye contact. Eye contact is a lot more trickier than what most people like it to be. And I'll explain why, because it varies between 3 different areas. First one is space. Second one is audience size. And the third one is learning how to prioritize. So let's think about that for a bit. Space. Presenting in a webinar format like so is very different than presenting in a boardroom, which is also very different than presenting in an auditorium or a theater. For instance, it doesn't really matter if the webinar has 10 people or 100 people. I always need to look at the camera lens, and it's as if I'm looking at all of you at the exact same time without moving my head. But in a boardroom, when the space is a lot more intimate, you have a lot more time to build relationships with everyone in the room in the same way that you have those types of relationships in your Toastmaster clubs. But if you're in an auditorium, you might not have the time to shift your body to look at everybody. Which brings me to my second point, audience size. Presenting to 8 people in a boardroom is very different than presenting to 1,000 people at the same time. Because if you have 15 minutes in both of these spaces, in the boardroom, you have time to look at everyone individually and build a rapport with them. But if you're speaking to 1,000 people, you can't just look at everyone because you won't have time. But here's an interesting one, since you're all very good at what you do, which is the third one, learning how to prioritize. Depending on the goal of your presentation, how you prioritize your eye contact will actually change. And let me give you an easy explanation for this. If you're at a Toastmasters club and you're giving a meeting or a presentation, there's not really anyone you're prioritizing. Everyone is listening to you, and you're really just there to educate and inspire. But what if you're the CEO of a company, like a marketing agency, and you want to sell ads? So I'll give you a classic, super easy example. Let's say we all work at a marketing agency and we want to do Coca-Cola's Super Bowl ads. Like, we want to be the team that does their ads so that when the Super Bowl happens, the video is the one that we made together. So naturally, Coca-Cola will pay a lot of money for us as a team to make this commercial. But we also have to realize that there's other companies that also want the job. We want the job. Another marketing team in another part of the US will want the job. So naturally, every single team will walk up and present. So what is going to make the difference between who wins the contract and who doesn't? Well, a lot of factors, but the one in eye contact specifically is who is the decision maker in the room. Another quick example. So we go together to Coca-Cola's board of, their meeting for this presentation. And at this meeting, there's different people. There's the CEO of the company, so the person who leads everything. There's maybe somebody who runs the marketing division at Coca-Cola. And then you might also have Joe, who started last week. And I'm not saying Joe isn't important. Joe is cool. Joe is fun. Joe is someone we need to look at. But Joe probably isn't making the decision as to whether or not we actually get the contract. So because of that, we need to prioritize some of our more important slides to the CEO and the people that actually make the decision. That is the difference between a decision maker and a spectator. Another easy example for Toastmasters specifically is an area contest. When we're competing in an area contest, sure, there's an audience, but what's the goal of the area contest? It's to win the area contest. And who makes the decision to win the area contest? Is it the audience? No, right? It's the judges who have been judging this area contest for many years. So who are you going to look at? Sure, you're going to look at the audience, but who are you going to spend more time with? Something to think about. But luckily for us, there's 3 techniques that apply for any space, any size, and any sort of prioritization. The first one is very simple. Prioritize to maximize. Prioritize your eye contact to the people who maximize your outcome. So in this webinar, there's no one specifically I'm trying to impress. It's more just, hey, let's learn together. Let's focus on the subject together. So I'm looking at you all equally. So if we were all in a room together, I would spend an equal amount of time with everyone, whether it's Craig, David, Michael, Brad, and everyone else in the room. But if I'm in a boardroom and I'm trying to sell Coca-Cola on our commercial, I'm going to spend a bit more time with the CEO. I'm going to spend a bit more time with the person who's making the decision or the judges in the area contest. Second tip, never deviate your eye contact from either your audience or your slides. If you look anywhere else, unless you're really advanced as a speaker, you generally lose credibility. So I'll give you an example. If I look here, 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 or here, I lose credibility as a speaker. Whereas if I keep my eye on the audience or slides if I need to, like so, then you always maintain your rapport with your audience. Third tip, always shift your body once to every audience group. So this advice is specifically for people who are scared to look at people in the eye, because I've been there. I struggled so much, especially in my early days, to look at people in the eye. Because public speaking is an odd thing where you're presenting to 100 people, and for some reason, all 100 people are just looking at you. So you're kind of there like, why is everyone looking at me? So to fix this, what I recommend you do at the beginning is to look at individual groups once. So here's an easy example. If we take that boardroom, you can look to the left and the right for a couple of minutes, and then the center. So in a 10-minute presentation, you go 2 minutes, 2 minutes to the left, 2 minutes to the right, back at the center. So I hope that's useful for you to understand eye contact. Just know that this is totally fine at the beginning. Then as you become more advanced, I'll challenge you to look at everyone in the eye. Last tip for the day, and then we'll wrap up. Mirroring. I want you to think about your mornings when you get up out of bed. If you're having an amazing day, this day is going to be great, and you look at yourself in the bathroom, that is the emotion that you'll have for the rest of the day. You're looking at someone who's happy, who wants to tackle the day, and everyone notices, whether it's your Toastmaster Club members, your friends, your family, your colleagues, everyone loves what you're doing. So that positivity is reflected to everyone there. But the opposite is also due. If your day is terrible, if you don't like what's happening, and you're not excited about the day, that is the emotion that you will have on the world. And the point I'm making is, as speakers, we are mirrors. We choose the emotions that we want our audience to convey. So my question to you as we conclude this presentation is simple. Which emotions will you choose? I've been locked into my house for the past 6 weeks too, but I'm choosing to show up. And in the same way that I chose calmness and excitement over boredom, the choice on which emotion you will choose is entirely up to you. Let's wrap up. Book recommendations. A lot of people ask me for recommendations on how to master public speaking communication. There's no better book than Scott Harrison's Thirst that I'll add in the Zoom call. He's a master storyteller. I base all my workshops on his ideology and his thinking, and he's a superstar, so I definitely look at that. And Richard Branson, Bill Gates, and everyone else has recommended this. All right. If there's anything I want you to take away from this presentation, it's the following. Public speaking and leadership is the exact same thing. And if you can understand that leaders are not born, but rather created, I believe that in public speaking, you can go from this to presenting in any room, whether it's a courtroom, a boardroom, or maybe even a karaoke room. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with me on social. I'm very accessible.
Bravo. Wow. That was very powerful. I'm grateful for you joining us. That was a wonderful message. I love the idea. Well, first of all, you said 55-year-old senior executive. I guess that's me now. I'm a senior executive. Oh God.
You're an exception to the rule,
Oh,
Craig.
there we
Don't
go.
worry.
Okay.
You're an innovator. You're different.